There was some research done years ago where they found that 66% of the time we're in autopilot or la la land. And
Mhm.
when you're in la la land and you get hit by change, you act surprised going back to the telenovela experience. And so now it's like, oh my God, what happened? And this is how the three A's came up for me. Number one A is of being aware. Because when you
Mhm.
get hit with change, boom,
Right.
what happened? What's going
Right.
on? Because then that leads to you doing the second A, which is to acknowledge. And
Mhm.
to acknowledge is different from acceptance because when I acknowledge something, there's a four-letter word in the word acknowledgement, which is to know.
Welcome to the Pivoting Wolf. Open conversations with interesting people from varying backgrounds across several different countries around the world. Hey, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of The Pivoting Wolf. I'm Rhonda Harris, and I'm here with my colleague turned friend, Sam Caballero. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Rhonda. I greatly appreciate it.
It's so good to have you here finally. We've only been talking about this for, 2 or 3 years?
Mm,
Oh, we're
Maybe
going to,
multiply that by two, but
yeah.
it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. So anyhow, I do want to share a little bit of a little trivia bit, just so people who don't know, because I don't think anybody knows. But remember, once upon a time, you and I were talking about collaborating together, and that's kind of where the name the Pivoting Wolf came from. Because when I first started having this idea, oh, I really want to talk about how people are pivoting in midlife. Remember, I had that that longing to do that. And your company is called Pivot N, and my company is White Wolf Consulting, and so we merged those together. And that's why I made that little comment about we've been doing this 2 or 3 years. We've been meaning to do this. Life just got busy. We never got a chance to collaborate, y'all, but here we finally are. And so we're gonna have like a fun little podcast today talking about something that both Sam and I care very much about, which is the pivot. So, without further ado, Sam, tell us a little bit about yourself. Start off with what's your latest pivot been?
Well, one of my latest pivots is to keep these dogs from speaking their minds here. And I know you're a pet lover, so and you have yours nearby.
Yeah,
So I
Sinatra
think
just
with
made his way back through the door again. The life of the pivoting pet owners, like.
exactly, exactly, and he's giving me his eyeballs, so it's been wonderful. So, and once again, Rhonda, thank you very much for this opportunity to come and speak to you on your podcast. I recently retired from the Air Force after 34 years of being a reservist, about 4 or 5 years active duty, give or take, and it's been a wonderful journey. Um, Recently, I've completed my doctorate program in strategic leadership, and I started that right during the pandemic, and I was just so happy that it's finally come to an end. But overall, I've been in learning and development for many, many years, and I've now come to this point in my life where I'm blessed to have the opportunity to be able to do this on my own. So this is where I'm at after 30 something years of being in this world of learning and development.
Well, I know that the transition into your retirement was a big, huge one. And because I remember conversations that we had around that during that time and the time leading up to that also, there was another pivot that was happening in your personal life. If you don't mind me sharing, your kids were going off to college. And I remember these conversations, they were very heartfelt and a little uncomfortable, if I'm being honest, because I was resonating with that whole empty nest thing. I had already gone through that with my daughter. And I can only imagine what a big transition it was for you to lean into civilian life after 30 years in the military. Now, I know that you weren't out in, combat and whatnot, but still, I know that there was a difference because there's as one can imagine, for most of us, especially when we have such a long, rich career, it becomes a part of our identity, right? And part of pivoting is not just about what you do, but it's about embracing who you are and who you will become and what you're leaning into in terms of how you identify yourself. So, I've spoken with other people who have a long military background, and when they move into civilian life, it's a significant change in mindset. Do you mind speaking about that just a little bit before we move on?
Sure. So life's a journey, and there's wonderful, beautiful times, and then there are challenging times. And most importantly, there are moments where you go from being engaged with certain things like raising children to they're not here anymore. They've spread their wings and they moved on. And of course, you realize, oh my goodness, it came so quickly. So when I came up with the concept about pivoting, it was because I found myself in a position where now I no longer had a role and I needed to figure out what I was going to do to continue to contribute to my household. And so that's how the whole concept of pivoting occurred. And then through that, I realized, and you have these insights throughout your life where you realize that um, what is it that's coming up and how do I engage in a way that's intentional? And so there have been many, many moments now where it is this process where you go through identifying what's my next step, what's my first step first, and then of course my second, my third, to be intentional and to find your way in the perspective of what it is that fulfills me in a positive and productive way. But it's this constant process and it doesn't stop. And the key, though, is that you have to be cognitively engaged and to recognize your surroundings and to also be thankful for the things that you do have. And I'm so thankful for the many, many things that I have from my family to the opportunities that pop up every day.
I know you are very thankful. I know that about your character. Um, for those who might be going through something similar or they're facing something similar, like what you mentioned, you said you no longer had this role and you had to figure it out. What kinds of emotions come with that people might not be prepared for, that we might want to tell them about to get ready for it, how to, because everything you said is makes sense, and we kind of know that children grow up and they move away. We all know that that's coming. But sometimes, and I know I experienced this myself, it's like, of course I know that you can read that, but sometimes there are these undefined emotions and feelings that you just, wow, I didn't count on it feeling like that. What was that like for you, and what would kind of advice would you give to people so that they are better prepared for whether it's an empty nester pivot or a, hey, I'm changing roles, I'm leaving jobs of either of my own choice or involuntarily? What kinds of emotions can they expect to have to deal with, and how would you advise them to move through that?
Well, of course, we can't stop our emotions. I mean, you take a look at the word emotion, you have motion, which is movement, and the E stands for
Mm-hmm.
energy. And
Mm-hmm.
when you think about the energy that comes up in the mind, it really boils down to the feelings of happiness, sadness, anger, joy, fear, disgust. And I remember when I got called while on vacation that I got let go, the first feeling that I had was betrayal. Then the second was sadness, and then the third was despair. And you think about how all of these emotions are just hitting you. And ultimately, you think also about, okay, well, how do I want to respond to this? And there is this pause that occurs. And just imagine you're in a foreign country and now I got to get my family back home. That was the day we were coming back. And there's so much that's happening in the brain and you have to concentrate because you're at the airport. You're answering questions about your status and all this and all you could think about is when I come home, there's no more needing to get ready to go to work the next day. And
Mm-hmm.
so one of the things that has truly helped has been to recognize and identify that you are who you are. You came into this world without being in that role, and you will continue to be the great person that you are. But it requires one to be insightful, mindful, and engaged with who they represent. What do they do every day?
Mhm.
What are the people that rely upon them? And I found so much comfort thinking about that on my 13-hour flight back from London to Dallas, because all I could think about was, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And then I remembered, wait a minute, I am who I am. This job doesn't make me who I am. And
Right.
so I will take all the things that they provided, add it to my treasure chest of tools and resources. And once I go through this morning process, and remember, there is a process, it could take a certain period of time. There's no limit or max or min. It is what it is for everyone. Everyone has their limits. But I know for me, it was about a good 15 days. And so once I mourned that, I was ready to get up and move on. Now, does it come back? It does. There will be moments and times where you'll think about something that happened or occurred, or a picture that pops up on your computer, and then you remember the wonderful times. But then you take
Mhm.
those wonderful times and you package it so that it could be a power pill for you in the future, because you will need it. But I've found that when these emotions pop up, even though they could be sad, you can leverage it in a positive and productive way to help you for your future.
That is very insightful, and I really appreciate you sharing that because it's really true and it's a great reminder. I think we could all use that reminder. Um, and it reminds me, actually, I just finished writing an article this morning that I'll be preparing for tomorrow. And it was a change management article, but during my research, I came across the work of, well, there's a few big hitters, but not to get down that rabbit hole too far. But the point is, talking about the emotional and psychological aspect of change, because that, again, that is change. So we're talking about pivots because these are, this is all in the realm of change, not just organizational change management, which professionals speak to in a certain way, and they kind of categorize it as if we as individuals aren't constantly going through some kind of a massive organizational change. We're the organization, we're the entity, we're always going through a change. And there are all kinds of frameworks and strategies for companies to help people navigate change. But how often do we as individuals, as people, recognize that we too deserve to have a framework and have something steady to help us navigate through that? So it's really important to be mindful of the fact that no matter what the change is, even if it's a really good change, there's always going to be an opportunity cost, something that you will leave behind in exchange for the something that you're pursuing, the current state versus the future state. It might be different environments, so in office versus your home, but the phenomenon is still relatively the same. So speaking to that point, I want to shift gears a little bit and get you to talk about something that I know you're really passionate about. Tell me a little bit about your company, Pivot In, and the work that you're doing, and why it's important to you, and how you're helping people to pivot, which is the
I
topic of
appreciate
the
that.
day, the name of the podcast, the whole reason for being here.
What I think is interesting is that for human beings, we are comfort creatures. We like to know that tomorrow is somewhat already established. It is already going to happen, whatever your routine is, and we don't like the fact that it may have an unexpected turn. And when it happens, it's like, oh my goodness, everything is thrown off. And your plan of whatever it meant to be intentional is now been hijacked or derailed or whatever you want to call it. And I know for me in the past, when that has happened, an unexpected announcement of something, at that moment, it's like a telenovela, of the 90s where somebody gets told some bad news and it's like, ugh, and they fall on the floor and drama starts to happen.
I
And
fell down, I can't get
that
up.
and exactly, it's like, "Ay, por favor." And I have been in those moments, and I thought to myself, "Sam, what was your whiffum in that situation?" And of course, whiffum is what's in it for me. You just
Mhm.
acted like a complete whatever. And now you're realizing you're having to apologize or make excuses or whatever. But in my journey, I learned that change happens. It happens at the most moment where you weren't expecting it. And there's this process where, okay, first off, am I okay?
Mhm.
I'm still here. I'm breathing. I could feel all my fingers. I'm good. Second, is there anything that I could do about it?
Right.
And I think that that right there, that second question, or first question, is there anything I can do about it? A lot of times when we find ourselves in that situation, asking that question, which is so powerful, we don't even ask ourselves that question. We just have this instinct that we can, even though we probably can't. And if I can't, then what am I willing to do to accept it and acknowledge it? And acceptance and acknowledgement is very different from each other.
That is true. And I want to kind of comment on that one point that you just made because I know you and I were speaking last weekend and we were having a conversation around, this state that you're in when you're going through a change. And a lot of times it's very uncomfortable because I find that more often than not, it is unexpected because, I mean, who's out there just rip roaring through their life, just deliberately, just bringing a whole bunch of change into their life, like you said, we're humans. We kind of stay away from that. So, do you remember the point that I made about how I see the value in stoicism when it comes to situations like this? And, there comes a time when you're grieving through the process, like you described a few minutes ago, it's inevitable. You really should just lean into it. And that's what I really like about um, some of the literature that I've read around stoicism, and it is what it is. Just accept it. Just going into it knowing, yeah, this is gonna suck. I think it's better to just face that head on and just let it wash over you and embrace it. And like you said, acknowledge it and just know that you don't necessarily have to act on everything. Sometimes things are just what they are, and there's nothing to be done about it. It just is what it is, and you just keep it moving. And eventually, it will either fade away because it will no longer be relevant, or you just won't care about it anymore and you won't notice it, and it just will become a part of the environment and it's background noise, and it's just a part of daily life. Um, I think that that isn't shared or taught or discussed enough because I see a lot of times people, uh, when they're going through a change, especially when it's uncomfortable, their first reaction is to resist it. Like, what can I do about it? What can I do to stop this? Let's try to work around it. Let's go over it, under it, and they get into this kind of a tumble where they're just trying to react to it instead of responding. The difference there. Reaction is like usually not very well pulled together. It's just off the cuff. It's a reaction, whereas a response is more thoughtful. And sometimes you could choose not to respond and, be very stoic about it. Just like, yep, I see you over there. I see you, discomfort. I feel you, discomfort. Welcome to the room. We're in this ride together. You go sit over there. I'm going to keep doing me. I see you're in the room. I'm not going to do anything about it because there's nothing I can do about it. And do I even need to exert the energy to try to do something about it? Oftentimes the answer is no. And you can learn something from the growth that comes from building that grit, from going through uncomfortable things. And if there's one thing that I really had an aha moment, this is years and years ago, I think as I was coming into my late 30s, and I realized, like, wow, I've been through some things. And I immediately took comfort with the knowledge. It was an insightful thing that just came to me. It's like, yeah, but you're kind of a badass because you're strong. Like, if you went through that, you can go through anything. And so when you have that kind of character building attributes that come through navigating different types of changes, that is definitely a beneficial side product of it. So I just wanted to comment on where you were going with that, because I remember I was talking about that last week, and I felt like that was a really important point, because even through all the work that I've done specifically around change management, I don't recall anybody just coming right out and just saying, it's kind of the equivalent, and I don't mean to be rude, but it's the equivalent of suck it up, buttercup. And I don't mean that to sound as, that sounds like it has a negative tone, but it's essentially when you distill it down to really what it means. It's
Well,
do hard
y-
things.
yeah, generationally, I know for you and I, it was that perspective of suck it up, buttercup. But when you do that and you just continue to press on, you don't do something that has to happen, and that is to recognize and identify those things that you learned and
Mm-hmm.
that you try your best not to do again. There was some research done years ago where they found that 66% of the time we're in autopilot or la la land. And
Mm-hmm.
when you're in La La Land and you get hit by change, you act surprised, going back to the telenovela experience. And so now it's like, "Oh my god, what happened?" And I this is how the 3 A's came up for me. Number 1 A is of being aware, because when you
Mm-hmm.
get hit with change, boom,
Right.
what happened? What's going
Right.
on? Because then that leads to you doing the second A, which is to acknowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And to acknowledge is different from acceptance, because when I acknowledge something, there's a four-letter word in the word acknowledgement, which is to know.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us do not take the time to do the research, the study, or whatever, even going to your phone and Googling it to find out what happened.
Right.
But when you don't do that, you fail to recognize and identify what happened, and is there's anything that I can do about it. Then the third A, which is recognizing, okay, I really cannot do anything about it. All I can do it is accept it.
Mm-hmm.
And acceptance is this perspective where you literally take the load off your back to say, I can't do anything about it, but by golly, I can know it. I can navigate around, above, or below it, realizing that I cannot do anything specifically. So, where do I want to put my energy and my effort? Because I'd
Mm-hmm.
rather put that in the things that I do control.
And that is exactly what I meant when I was talking about the suck it up, buttercup. It's pretty much that in a package. Because that's the opposite of burying your head in the sand or running away, stark raving mad down the street with your hair on fire, trying to avoid everything. So I was,
Absolutely.
so I wasn't trying to be callous when I said "suck it up, Buttercup," but the "sucking it up, Buttercup" is all of that. You just have a nicer way of putting it together. I like your
But
package. It's the
but no, but
triple
I
A. It's
also
the
like the
triple A Buttercup sucking.
but I also like the fact that sometimes you need to run down the street with your hair on fire just to let all that energy out and just
Well,
say,
yeah,
"Golly."
do that, but by all means, come back. Come back. You have to come back. You can't just keep running. This isn't Forrest Gump. You're not going to just keep running, you know? So, and I think we're aligned on that, but I just the point that I was trying to make is that, there's a certain amount of grit even involved with what you defined. There is strength in becoming aware. There's strength in taking the steps to become more knowledgeable and acknowledge. And there is strength in acceptance, all of those things. And that's to me, that's the foundation of the stoic approach that I was talking about. And like that's the suck it up buttercup part, because that's very different from becoming a victim,
Mhm.
blaming others,
Mhm.
avoidant behaviors, lying to yourself, living in denial in a land of alternative reality and facts, and all a whole other host of things that people do when they are trying to avoid the dance with change. So that's kind of where I was going with that.
But no, no, there's this old movie with Steve Martin from the '70s called The Jerk. There was a scene where I don't know what I don't know the full background, but I remember him picking up his plant and leaving the house. He just picked up this plant. "I'm outta here." And that scene to me resonates because sometimes you gotta pick up your garden and move on because no one else is gonna help you harvest your veggies and your fruits, and you have to definitely know when it's time to move on.
Yeah. Or start another garden somewhere else. Yeah.
There there
If
you go.
necessary.
There you go.
I just
There you
want to
go.
I want to pause for a semi-commercial break. I hear your fur baby in the background, and now Sinatra has absolutely just dominated the forbidden space over here. Hello. I don't know if you could hear him. He's over here making noise. But anyhow, now this is a great conversation, Sam, and one that I really wanted to touch on is, what do you bring to your clients through Pivot? Let's talk about that. What are the outcomes? We've talked about the change and the pivot and all the emotional aspects and the things that you have to go through to navigate these difficult seasons in life. So, if I were a client, just speak to the audience out there, potential clients out there. What will they gain from working with you at Pivot In? How can they really come out the other side of their change having worked with Sam?
Prior to being reorged out, I didn't really understand the power of coaching,
Mm-hmm.
which is e equated and connected to the power of the open-ended question. And I remember because in my career I've been reorged 3 times, and a couple of those times I received a coach. The coach wasn't really a coach. All they would say and tell me was, "Go update your resume and go do this and go do that," and not particularly connecting with me to find out what is important, what's clear, what's valuable for me. It was all this process, and
Right.
that didn't do anything for me. So, one of the things that has to happen is that you have to have a courageous, clear, and engaged conversation when it comes to what's important for you. What do you want to do? How has your past molded you to where you're at today? And how does today look like for tomorrow? And when you get asked these open ended questions that usually start with what, how, when, where, who,
And
it's
and a
clear.
whole bunch of whys.
With the understanding of the why question, because the why question could actually be somewhat judgmental. And one of the things that I found for me was that when I got asked the why question, it was much more powerful when I trusted the person was asking me.
Mm-hmm. Oh
And
well, that's a
that
given.
person absolutely. And that question had a lot of validity to it. So to answer your question, when people come to me, they're going to get the support, the assistance, but they are also going to get an engaging conversation that really focuses around what's important for them.
Hmm. See, yeah, so so what I'm hearing you say as a coach myself, and I really can't overstate this, the importance of coaching so that you can elicit self-awareness in that person. Because, touching back on some things that we've already talked about, um, you really clearly articulated the importance of the acknowledge part and the knowing, right? I think it's fair to say that to some degree or another, people can sometimes not know themselves that well. And there are a lot of reasons for that. It could be that their lives have been heavily influenced by societal expectations or their family, their peers, and it's the typical story. You're going to grow up and be a lawyer or a doctor, and you're going to go to this college, and it's like kids don't really get enough time or an opportunity or even permission to really think about what they want because they're dictated to from birth. You're going to eat this, you're going to go to sleep at this time, you're going to go to this school, you're going to do your homework, and that just goes. I mean, it's never ending. When has that ever changed for anybody, right? So even as we become adults and we're so conditioned to taking advice and following and obeying, especially certain cultures where it's more heavy than others where you do not question your parents. If they say you're going to law school, you're going to law school or whatever. Some manage to break out of that, but the phenomenon that I'm talking about. So this self-awareness, this reflection is huge because um if you miss that part and you jump to doing things or like someone telling you, oh, go do this and go do that based on the initial perceived assessment of what the situation is, you're missing an opportunity to really get down to the bottom of what a person knows about themselves. Um, I have a very, very close friend that comes to mind who was heavily influenced to a point, her mom really, it was just an unspoken thing. She was going to be a doctor, period. And so she pursued that halfway around the world, even, went to Australia to study and did all these things. And just keeping the story kind of short, turns out that really wasn't her dream. And it took a lot of pain and tears and a lot of money. And because she got her master's degree, I mean, she went to the point where she had invested quite a bit into that path. And she really didn't know what she really wanted. And somehow, I mean, I remember talking with her quite a bit and it worked out. And I just asked her one day, I was like, is this what you want or is this what your mom wants? And it just hit her like a brick. And she was like, yeah, I think it's what my mom wanted. I'm like, wow, wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of investment that she put into pursuing something that if she would have been given an opportunity or a space and permission to really pursue what she wanted. Mutinies happening behind me. She could have. I don't want to get a shoulda, coulda, woulda. She learned and gained a lot from her experience. I had to learn a long time ago. Don't discount your experiences. Maybe you look back and like, yeah, that's not really what I probably wanted to do, but hey, it's done. Whatever. But anyway, long story short, now she's training to be a pilot. Talk about an about face. And she's doing really well and she loves it. She's so engaged. And I'm telling you, all the years that I've known her, she talked about medical school and and that was like such a part of her identity back then. But I will tell you, knowing who she is now compared to who she was then, I noticed a difference. She didn't have that spark when she talked about being a doctor. When this woman is talking about flying, and when she is flying, it's like, wow. I mean, like, I'm over here, I'm all the way over here in the Netherlands. She's currently living in Chicago. So, I haven't physically seen her face to face since I moved to Europe almost 8 years ago. Actually, she and I both left the country 1 month apart from each other in 2018. She went to Australia. I came to the Netherlands. We haven't seen each other since then. But let me just tell you, the vibes coming through the Zoom when she's talking about flying, and she sent me some videos of her flying, and it's like, it's so inspiring. She is living her passion, because she had permission to self reflect and know herself and learn from that and then take action. And you can't skip that step. You cannot have anyone who's coming in to coach you and they're just immediately starting with direction and instructions. They're not coaching you, and they're missing the biggest possible gap ever, because you've got to get down to the core of the why. Who am I? What do I want? Why is this meaningful for me? And why now? um I'm not going to go through all the whole competencies. We know, we're coaches, we know what I'm talking about, but just for the people who are listening, this is such an important part. And if anybody is out there in the audience land, if anybody is coaching you and they start off by giving you instructions and they haven't done a good bit of work to get you to the point where you have asked a lot of questions and even gotten a bit uncomfortable, you're not being coached. So back to you, Sam. Uh, I didn't mean to hijack, but I really wanted to touch on that because it's such a huge piece of being coached. But please continue. I just had to
Well,
chime in
of
there.
course, you're right about that, and I think because a lot of times, as we grow into our lives and we're trying to figure out what we like and don't like, what our superpower is, I think it definitely hits in terms of people who are cognitively on and being able to recognize for them, this I like, this I don't like. Am I doing this for someone else? There's this perspective that the Okinawans practice in Japan called ikigai, which is this perspective of what is your reason for being. And it
Mm-hmm.
really hits on the four primary questions, which is what do you love? What is your superpower? What does the community that I live in need? And how I can be compensated. And compensation is more than just money. It's about my autonomy, my ability to make my own decisions,
Mm-hmm.
that whatever I do, I have an appreciation for it deep down in my heart. And when you
Mm-hmm.
combine that all, it really hits on what are you passionate about? What is it that you say is your profession? But what do you feel you're called to do as a vocation? And
Yeah.
then when you're out and about and you're doing your thing, you're messaging it to the world. What is your mission? And so passion, profession, vocation, and mission. So when I engage my clients, I really focus around those four questions and how it all hits on those four elements. And your friend, passionate about being up in the air,
Mm-hmm.
and now taking on this profession because in her journey of becoming a doctor, I think somebody may have tapped her on the shoulder and said, I think you should. And then, of course, she filled in the blank because now she's messaging the world that I do this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so powerful, and the reason why that story really resonates with me in particular is, as you may remember, when we were like, I started when we first started this podcast, and I was talking about how you and I were talking about, yeah, let's collaborate, let's do it, because we were both having a pivot at the time. I remember, you were already talking about your upcoming retirement, and I was really going through some kind of I'll just call it a burnout, what I think it was at the time, when I realized, like, I'm not feeling very fulfilled with what I'm doing right now. And I felt that for the longest time my creative side had been stuffed away in a closet, and I was not feeling like I was fully showing up as myself, and I wasn't feeling fulfilled with my work. And I knew I was in danger. It was like, if I continue doing things the way that I'm doing now, something's gonna break, and it's gonna be really ugly. So I was very glad that I at least had that level of awareness before it did break and become ugly. But that's when I knew I had to go on some kind of a mission to figure it out, because I'm not going to say that I came from a background where I had these really opinionated parents that just told me what I was going to do. On the contrary, I just kind of floated around and did things, but I was influenced by people pleasing and wanting to be validated. And so I would take up things that I thought seemed worthy and of value, and they were, respectable things to do. And um, even though I didn't have anyone crashing down, pointing their finger and telling me, you will do this, the influences were there. And I think we've all at least experienced that to some degree, whether you call it peer pressure or just being influenced by your environment or whatever. And I wasn't supported fully when I was very young and I was extremely creative. My mom was supportive, but when it came to, well, you get to a point where your parents like, oh, well, that's cute, yeah, you like to see, you were in a garage band when you were in high school. Yeah, that's cute. Okay, anyway, so are you gonna get a real job? Because like music's not gonna be your life. Like that was cute, but you're an adult now, so crack on with getting a real job. Things that's pretty common. Um, but nonetheless, those creative pieces never left, and they kept stabbing through, and I felt quite a bit of despair. And because, like the ikigai, what is my calling? I still feel like I'm finding there's so many facets to my calling, but I can honestly say that I feel like I'm in such a better place now than I was back then when we were first, well, kind of like when we first met, right? Because when you give yourself that permission to explore that or even think about it, that's the first step, you know. Um, and you're probably thinking, well, you're a grown, very, very grown woman. Like you're in your 50s. Like, who's giving you permission? But mentally, we still have these little traps in our, I don't care how old we get, we still have these little traps in our minds, because the only thing that changes is our chronology of our body. The mindset can still stay at whatever age you're stuck in your head if you don't make these changes. Wouldn't you agree? It's like,
Oh, absolutely. So, in my research with Ikigai, I found out about how it relates to the four domains of emotional intelligence. And I thought that was pretty interesting because the first thing on emotional intelligence is your ability to be self aware. And like we talked about already, self awareness is so so important because you have to be aware of what comes up for you. And your friend who found out from mom that you need to be this doctor, um, most people are like, okay, well, she's telling me I should. I trust you, and let's do it. And then you sign up, you do all your tests, and now you find yourself like, oh, the next domain is social awareness, and social awareness can take on all kinds of connotations from engaging with other people, but most importantly, engaging with your environment. How is that environment impacting me? Whether it's the place where I'm going to school at, the stuff I'm reading, and I'm realizing that this is not necessarily perking my interest because now you go into your self management, your regulation, and she wants me to do this. Something in the background is telling me not to do this. I'm trying to be intentional, but every time I keep kicking this ball, it's not landing in the target. So something is up. And then I go back to my self awareness. What's happening?
mm-hmm,
But the last one is relationship management. Of course, I want to keep the relationship with my mom, but I know that I have to be honest with myself
mm-hmm.
and engage with my integrity and just say, this is not what I want to do.
Yeah, and I think
One
that's where a lot of
final
anxiety can come in for people having to face that. Some people, for some, that's not the easiest thing to do, to stand up, especially to your parents
but
or your
one final
peers.
domain that has come up, and when you Google it, and you won't see it, but one of the things that I think is very interesting and it's highly connected is the motivation piece. What is moving you? And there's a reason why motivation and move start with mo to include money. And I'm not saying that money is a great motivating factor, but you got to think about what is moving me to either want to or not do whatever.
Hmm.
And that goes back to your self-awareness, your social awareness, your self-management, and of course, your engagement with others. And a lot of times people are realizing that my ikigai is not what you think it is. It is something completely different. But
Right.
ask me and I'll tell you what it is.
I really am so glad that you brought up the emotional intelligence piece, because I mean we could have a whole separate conversation around all of that. And as we're coming to the end of our time, I want to ask you one final question. So we've talked about, the power of the pivot and, ways that you can navigate through it, why it's important to do it so that you can find your ikigai and lean into your purpose. And so that does require a pivot, because if we're not there, if then we have to change. So that being said, what kind of advice can you give to people to help them reinforce and support the pivot once they've gotten to the other side of it, to make sure they don't slip back?
There's this movie, The Nutty Professor, and the Nutty Professor's mom would say, "Oh, Sheldon, Hercules." The reason why I bring that up is because any person that does that has this sense of endearment, but
Hmm.
there's an emotion there with joy and just happiness, and in Spanish, alegría, we call it, which is this sense of sweet happiness. That's my definition of alegría.
Hmm.
When it comes to pivoting, one of the things you have to do, like we talked about, which is awareness, is to remember, when was it a time when you had your oh Hercules? It's that
Hmm.
moment where you feel fulfilled and happy and engaged and connected and cannot wait to do this again. And because a lot of times we're not necessarily cognitively on, we're in our own little worlds of la la land, it's so important to remember those times, those moments where you're like, oh, just I want to do that again.
Hmm.
So for me, it was about engaging in the classroom in a workshop. It was connecting with someone and finding out what's important for them and asking them, what is it you want to do next now that you know that that's important for you? To me, that's so fulfilling.
Hmm.
So now I am unapologetic. I don't make excuses because I need to go do this or that. I really truly enjoy the things that fill my ikigai, which is about my reason for being. So, to answer your question, it is to remember the moment that you were very, very happy and what it is that fulfilled you.
Mm.
Keep that in the
That's,
back of your mind as you navigate and you make your decisions and choices of what you want to do next.
I think that's excellent advice. And I want to add to that, that, and, it's also worthwhile to be reminded of the potential habitual setbacks that might sabotage that, because we've got all the things that we talked about, all the reasons why and everything, but let's not underestimate the power of habit. So without going into a whole other lengthy conversation, I just want to add to that, that whatever it is that you need to do for yourself to plan for that, create an environment that supports the new change. Surround yourself with people who support the change, and just be aware and be on the lookout, and always be in that state of curiosity and being reflective and thinking about what is important to you and why you did this and what is the cost if you go back. And similarly, flip side of the same coin, what is the cost if you don't make the change? And when you think about those risks, I think that can help to build a foundation of support for reinforcement and sustaining the change. So, um, thank you for your answer to that. So, we've come to the end of our time, Sam. I've really enjoyed the conversation. Please tell us how we can reach you. Where can we find you? And I will put this in the description as well. But tell us one last little parting nugget of, what you're up to, where can we find you, and what's your next move?
Well, I appreciate that, Rhonda. Thank you very much once again for this wonderful opportunity to speak to you on your podcast. You can find me at pivotn.com, pivotn.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn. By going to PivotN, I'm on LinkedIn, and also Sam Caballero. And I would be more than happy to connect with anyone who would like to identify what it means for them as their next pivot. And my next pivot is going to uh, graduate with a doctorate in a couple of weeks and document every little thing I know about what it means to pivot, because I'll be coming out with more resources and more tools in the very, very near future so that you can pick it up and start leveraging your power to move forward.
That sounds wonderful. Well, thank you again, everybody. We will see you next time.